there, name's Shirdel. Before the feature presentation begins, allow me to take just a second to introduce myself. 3 things you need to know about me. I guarantee I'm more British than you are. I can say and spell him on arch microscopic silica volcanokinesis. It's a bit sad really. And I love me some video games. If you do too, you came to the right place. If you're here to watch yet another funny video game review because you've watched all the ones you can find and you just can't get enough of them, well, you came to the right place too. Oh, I will say, but I'm new to this particular gig, but I wouldn't have dropped a bunch of cash on a shiny HD camcorder as well as a proper video editor if I wasn't dead serious about it. I may not be on the level of some people who've been doing this sort of thing for years now, but I am putting myself on a higher standard than anybody else. So if it's good enough for me, chances are it's good enough for you too. Now, enough of that. I'm here to explain, I'm here to entertain, and I'm here to play some goddamn video games. And with that being said, it begins! What? Didn't really expect some fancy smanchy intro right off the bat, did you? Jesus. Anyway, when you think about racing games, you generally split them into 3 different subgenres, so to speak. On one side, you have games like Forza Motorsport and Gran Turismo, which pride themselves on their realism. On the other, you have the weapon-filled fun-for-everyone games like Mario Kart, and shifting awkwardly in between them are games like Blur, Burnout and Need for Speed. But back in the 5th generation of consoles, things weren't quite that simple. Then there were all sorts and varieties of racing games, a different scratch up for every itch. Some games focused on pure destruction and not racing at all. Others have more of an escape the police and be a criminal feel to them. And still others were focused on going round tracks as fast as possible, optimising your time in trial events. However, what we're focused on today is a game which prides itself on being like a British favourite, the good old-fashioned Demolition Derby. Take a bunch of homemade bang-up cars, drive them round an oval circuit and have them smash into one another. But there was only one racing series that was really putting the effort into trying to replicate the thrill and excitement of the Demolition Derby and bring it to home consoles. And that was Studio 33's Destruction Derby series.
The original Destruction Derby came out in 1995 on the MS-DOS and the PlayStation, promoting itself as the first racing game that lets you smash into, bump around, and ultimately destroy opposing cars, beating them both literally and literally. Destruction Derby promoted having a combination of the arcade-style racing of games like Ridge Racer and Need for Speed, along with some destructive elements thrown in, similar to games like Twisted Metal and Vigilante 8. The best of both worlds.
In a nutshell, this first game was fairly well praised, especially with the DOS's online multiplayer, but it felt a bit pedestrian, not as destructive and chaotic as it was hyped up to be.
Destruction Derby 2 was released a year later for the PC and the PlayStation, proving to be a major hit in good old Blighty. This sequel had 7 tracks, as well as an announcer in the form of Paul Page, someone who pretty much no one has ever heard of.
Anyway, to put it simply, the game did improve on its predecessor's faults, but it still felt more like a stock racer than a carnage-filled destruction racing game.
Next was Destruction Derby 64, released in 1999. This was actually a gigantic revamp of the first Destruction Derby, made exclusively for the Nintendo 64, adding better graphics, more tracks, more cars, another mode in Capture the Flag, and multiplayer for up to 4 people.
Despite all of these games having reasonably high critic reviews, the series wasn't as popular as some other racing franchises, and with the next generation of consoles already underway, Studio 33 decided to make one more game exclusively for the PlayStation, pushing the old console to its limits. and attempting to create the ultimate destruction racer. The result? There we go. Destruction Derby RAWR.
Released in mid-2000s, this game strove to accomplish what the other games in this series couldn't. Not just be a great racing game, but to also prove itself as a game that is ripe with mayhem, carnage, and destruction. It was a childhood favourite of mine, but I haven't played the game in quite a while, so it's going to feel as good as new to me.
So, let's see if Studio 33 accomplished what it's tried to do several times now already. It's trying to strip this game down to its raw bones and see what Destruction Derby RAWR is made of. Let's give it a spin. Fantastic! Jesus! Don't bloody scare me like that!
The rest of the intro is a lot like this, just showing cars smashing into each other and taking tight turns and that sort of thing. Although it's worth mentioning that the intro is accompanied by an awesome metal track that gets you pumped up for the game itself. I know I'm pumped.
Can anyone stop their mechanical mayhem?
No! Stop making me bloody jump! Now you've got a girl screaming at me. This isn't bloody Santa Carts.
Well, here we are in the main menu, and the first thing you'll probably notice are the two massive cogs in the top right of the screen. When you move in the menu, the cogs move too. It's a cool little detail. So, you can see that there are 4 options. We'll start with Wrecking Racing, see what that gives us. Anyway, as you can see, the Wrecking Racing mode is the main meat of the game. 25 of the 31 tracks in the game are here, and they're arranged in a rather odd way. When you complete a race, you unlock the 2 tracks that are placed below it. Simple enough, but I can hear you cry. Why are there more tracks on the right than on the left? Well, don't worry, for that shall be answered soon. But first, let's go into the first race, Dragonfly. So, as you can see here, I have 4 cars to choose from at the start, all with different stats. The problem is, I can't tell what all these icons mean. What's this foot do? Is it speed or acceleration? Or is this dial acceleration? And what's this tyre on the ground? Is it driving response or suspension? Or is the axle grindy thingy suspension? I can imagine the anvil as weight, but what does weight do? Is it good or bad? Or is the anvil actually how much damage my car can take, or both? There's no way of telling without reading the manual. That's a poor interface decision.
No matter. Plenty of games have a few poor UI choices. I'm here to race, so let's race.
I do have to say, look at that cool map of the track. I do like how it goes from the prototypey wire form to the finished concept art. Enough of that, the race is on! We're off! And the first thing I want to talk about is the controls, which are an essential part of any racing game. And these controls aren't that bad at all. They're very sharp and responsive, no doubt. The feel of the cars are very good as well. From the bumpy suspension to the turning, it feels a lot like a real car, which is hard for a game on the PS1 to accomplish. I must say though, I find it a bit odd that one button is used for braking and one button is used for reversing, when you can just use the reverse button to brake anyway. It's not the handbrake button, that's over here. It's just one button that brakes and doesn't reverse, and one that brakes and reverses. It's not bad, just odd. Anyway, let's talk about some of the game mechanics, in particular, the destruction element of the game. There are plenty of different ways to damage an enemy car, and every different crash technique has a different name. There are names like Teeth Rattler, Gut Wrench, that don't really make much sense, to much more bland names like 180-degree spin and 90-degree roll. You can combine these crash moves into one crash combo, I guess, which you will be dead chuffed to know have their own range of silly terms. Some of my favourites include the roller coaster, Undertaker, and corkscrew. No one's going to get that reference. These crash techniques aren't just for nothing, by the way. If a car gets too damaged, it will become wrecked, which means it's gone. Gone. Gone.
I'm doing all the references, aren't I?
For a PS1 game, the visible damage is really good too. It doesn't get much better than a buckled bonnet, later on having the bonnet just fly away completely, but it's nice. Oh, and by the way, don't think your car can't get wrecked either. The car's got a damage meter in the bottom left. The green oblongs will turn amber, then red, and finally black. If one of the oblongs gets too damaged, your car will become a lot harder to control, and I mean a lot harder. Not only that, the blank square in the middle will slowly turn red the more damage you get, and if it goes all the way, you guessed it, you're wrecked and the game's up.
Damaging cars isn't just used for the sake of getting rid of opponents, by the way. Every crash technique gives you a certain amount of points. The more damaging the technique, the more points you get.
I won the first race, as you'd expect, but you'll notice the number of points I got was way over the required target of 1000. Well, you get 1000 points for getting in first place and less for lower positions, and you also get destruction points for damaging other cars. It's cool that the other cars have their own scoreboards as well. Anyway, let's get back and find out what new tracks I've unlocked. Oh hey, I got put on the trophy. That's pretty cool.
Oh, bonus cars. Oh hey, have I unlocked a new car? Nope.
So, I've now unlocked 2 more tracks. The one on the left is Oil Slick, and the one on the right requires 1200 points to win. Yep. Getting in first place isn't enough. You need destruction points, at least 200 of them, in order to move on.
You want to know why there are more tracks on the right than on the left? It's because the tracks on the right are harder. The further and further to the right you go, the harder and harder it gets.
Well, I'm not a pansy. Let's go do Axhead. Okay, so I've got 140 destruction points and I'm in 7th place. But where's everyone else? There's no one behind me, but I can't see anyone in front of me either.
Seriously, where is everyone? Been racing for a few laps now. I just can't find anyone. It's no mini-map either, just a silly little radar that replaces the damage screen. So I have absolutely no idea.
I did eventually find some other cars, but by this point I had so much damage that I didn't want to risk ramming into them. You need to play really carefully, because you need to dish out enough damage to get the points, but then you can't race too aggressively, so you start slowing down for corners early. Axhead is okay, because I only need a minimum of 200 damage points, but, spoiler alert, the later levels need more and more, up to a maximum of 2000 points. That's ridiculous.
The problem I have with this game isn't that it's too hard, at least not yet. The problem I have is that it's too hard too early. A steep learning curve. When I'm not even a quarter of an hour into the game, I want to either be learning, or better yet, enjoying the easy races while I'm still learning. Not playing a damage, speed, risk, micromanagement game. Anyway, I beat that level, so let's move. Yep.
Let's just keep going down the right and on to the next track, which requires 1,400 points now. I know I could do one of the tracks on the left, but let's just see how far I can go for now. Well, guess I better reverse. What? I'm sorry, can we see that again, please? Look at the speed! The speed! I'm sorry, but no car in real life reverses that fast. That's just stupid. Anyway, while I'm racing here, let me talk about a few more things, starting with that little blue bar in the bottom right. Well, that's your industry standard nitrous oxide, which you can only use for about 10 seconds in total for each race. It's a racing specialty, really. Outside of that, let's talk about some other things like the sound, that being the music and the sound effects. While the music isn't fantastic by any stretch of the imagination, it's good enough to provide some enjoyment while playing and fits the game like a glove. The sound effects, however, are a bit hit and miss. Some are absolutely delicious, like the sound that plays every time you successfully perform a crash technique. And others are a bit... I do, however, have a few very serious complaints about this game, and one of them is the cars themselves, or should I say, the differences between them. The cars do have very slight differences between one another, but they're not really noticeable at all. I do mean that, unless there's something wrong with me, which is always a possibility, there is almost no detectable difference between any of the cars. I mean in every category, from speed to handling. As you might guess, that's not a good thing.
You need to be able to feel the differences between good cars and bad cars to have any idea what you should use. For example, in Burnout, you can easily tell the differences between cars that are virtually identical. You can feel the heaviness of a muscle car when you slam it into a rival, and you can feel the increase in speed and the decrease in traction and control when going from class to class, which is perfectly countered by your increasing skill of the game and the knowledge you gain as you're playing. In Destruction Derby RAWR, every car feels the same, despite actually being very different. It can be frustrating when you lose, because you feel as though you've done everything you can and it just wasn't enough, when chances are you simply picked the wrong car. However, and the other big complaint I have that I did touch on before, is that this game really is just too hard.
As I mentioned before, every car has their own scoreboard, but it goes further than that. Every single car in the race is treated like a player. And I don't just mean they have their own scoreboard, they battle and race against each other as well. And as a result, if you're not racing as well as one of them, you're not going to do as well as them. And do you know what else that means? No rubber banding at all. You might be saying, well, that's a good thing, isn't it? I thought rubber banding was just a cheap way to make everyone really close to each other. Do you have any idea what a racing game is like with no rubber band AI at all? Sure, some games use it way too much, but when you have none whatsoever, it means that everyone's going to be really, really spread out. And that means the cars in front have a smart enough AI not to crash very much, and because there's no way to restrain their speed, in the later levels when the AI is even harder, and put that on top of the fact you're micromanaging your damage so you can't take unnecessary risks, and you still need to damage other cars, you need to play perfectly to have a hope of catching the cars right in front. Hell, there's a good chance you'll end up lapping the cars in last place, which aren't even wrecked, before you get in first, and that's really, really bad. Before you ask, no, there's no difficulty setting either. Some of the harder tracks, even when you've mastered the game, will take hours to beat. So don't feel bad if you're stuck on the left side of the screen. For most of the game, I was exactly the same. It's probably how the developers wanted the game to be like, but there's a very fine line between challenging and frustrating, and unfortunately this game just crosses that line.
Alright, well, I've had enough of wrecking racing. Let's quit and try one of the other ones. Why would you tell me that I didn't unlock a car when I quit the race? I don't friggin' those cars. Bloody friggin' what's the bloody It's just, why would they do that? It's as if they're trying to openly mock you, as if they're going, ha, look at you, haven't unlocked anything. Does it when you win a race, when you lose a race, you quit a race. Just don't get it.
Well, let's try the next mode. See if we can't get that bad taste out of our mouths. It's called Smash for $, which sounds like something a Call of Duty fanboy would have as their Xbox Live gamer tag. This mode actually has all the cars unlocked. Only thing is, you don't have enough cash to buy most of them. You buy a car with cash, and any leftover money you have, you can put into increasing their stats, although each car only has a certain limit. It does feel like a bit of a rip-off that most of the cars are listed several times, just with higher stats. Anyway, this mode is pretty similar to Wrecking Racing. You just do races, and the points you get translate into cash. You win a race, you move on to the next one, and you have to finish first place in the league compared to all the other cars, which isn't easy. While we're racing again, let me just talk about one last subject I haven't touched upon, the graphics. I have to say, while the general graphics, the cars and the tracks themselves are fantastic for the standards of the PlayStation, the background mostly consists of textureless and paper-thin 2D images, and they all look very low quality. They betray that this game is on, even around the time it was released, very old hardware. I really think this game would have benefited a lot from being on the PS2. But, for what they had to work with, they did a great job. What I love especially are the tracks themselves. Every single one feels a little different, and 31 tracks is a lot by today's standards. Hell, Mario Kart Wii has 32. Although a few tracks are actually the same, just with a slightly different routes or change in weather or both, they all feel completely different from one another, and without a doubt it's one of the best things about the game. Going back to Smash for $, mode, after you finish a race you have to repair your car, fix the damage done to it. The less you damage the car, the more money you save, but the more conservatively you have to race, meaning the slower you race, meaning the less money you make. Why is this game as complicated as StarCraft? As you can guess, if your car becomes wrecked at all, or if it's too damaged and you didn't win enough cash to pay for it, well sorry, you've got to start from the last time you saved. Forgot to save? Oh, you got to start over again. You can sell a car for less than you bought it to earn that last little extra to buy a better one, but the game's too hard for you to want to play this mode when it comes down to it. Seriously, Although I don't consider myself an expert at racing games, I am at least decent. I mean, I got all the Platinum Relics on Crash Team Racing, and the Special License on Gran Turismo 4. But this game is just too hard. Enough of Smash for dollars. Let's just go into the last mode, Battle. This is actually 4 modes in one, each being very different. The main fun in these battle modes isn't in playing on single player, but on multiplayer, where you can have 3 of your buddies alongside you. None of my friends want to play an old PS1 game, believe it or not, so unfortunately I'm not going to be able to cover these modes in great detail, as single player doesn't do them judgment. Trust me though, they're a lot of fun with friends. The first is Assault, which is a little bit of an oddball. There are 4 teams of 2 cars each, and 1 car in each team is an invincible, computer-controlled Humvee. They're the ones racing, not you. Your objective is to make sure your Humvee stays in first place by either stopping the normal cars from attacking it, or slowing down the other Humvees so yours stays in the lead. The next is the infamous Destruction Derby. It returns from the second game, and is still pretty much the same. 20 cars, 1 massive arena, and the last car standing wins. It's not as crazy as it was in Destruction Derby 2, but it's still pretty bloody chaotic and a load of fun. The main difference is that there are now 3 different sub-modes. Classic, where you have to get as many points as you can. Armageddon, where every other car is only trying to attack you and you have to survive as long as possible. And Vampire, with a Y, where you can leech points from any opponents you attack. The third mode is Pass the Bomb, which is for all intents and purposes a hot potato version of Destruction Derby mode. Nothing else to it. The final mode, and my personal favourite, is Skyscraper. Why is it called Skyscraper? Well, you're literally on top of a skyscraper. It's pretty much the same as Destruction Derby again, except you can literally ram or be rammed off of the skyscraper and onto the cold hard floor below. Gruesomely fantastic.
Well, that's about it for the Destruction Derby RAWR. Unless you want to go into the options menu. Why do you want to go into the options? There's nothing there. No car to use. No track to race on. Just a bunch of options. No reason to be there at all. Perhaps when you talk about this game with your friends, you'll say, "Oh, did you play the options menu? The options menu was my favourite." I hope your friends find this concerning. So, what do I think of Destruction Derby RAWR? Well, I know I bashed it a fair bit, but I honestly do quite like this game. The destruction elements are great, all the different tracks are really interesting and enjoyable, and the battle modes are a load of fun if you get some friends round. But I still can't get past the absurd difficulty. Wrecking Racing and Smash for Dollars are just too hard to be able to enjoy all that much. The learning curve is far steeper than it should be, and it does get really frustrating really quickly. At times I love this game, at times I hate it. The question is, did Studio 33 accomplish what they set out to do and make the ultimate destruction racer? Well, yeah, they did. Sure, it's a bit hard, but that's the only real problem I have with this game. Apart from that, it really is great. I'd say one of the best racing games on the PlayStation 1. If you told me that you wanted a game with the somewhat sadistic fun that comes from vehicular destruction, along with the fun and addictive competition that comes from a solid, realistic racer, and you wanted it on the PS1, I'd say no doubt about it, this is the game for you. But I'd ask you if you had a PS2 or an Xbox, because while this is no doubt the best of its kind on the PS1, there is one gaming series that is so much better, and that's Burnout. In particular, Burnout 3 Takedown, arguably one of the best racing games of all time. Burnout 3 is better in every single way by a country mile than this game ever was. In fact, just about any Burnout game is. Studio 33 released one more game after this one, Destruction Derby Arenas, in 2004 on the PS2.
The game received low to mixed reviews and was criticised for its cartoonish feel and lack of realism, bad handling in general, and even no restart option in races. It was the last game Studio 33 released. Afterwards they were bought by EA and were reborn as EA Northwest.
It's sad that while this game did have a few bad points, it finally accomplished what they had strove towards from the very beginning, only to lose it all a year later to a game that was better in every way and benefited from the power, the superior power, that the next gen consoles had in a way this game never could. Still, did have a good run. Was the king of its genre for the whole year. It did have a good run. That's the way I like to see things. Glass half full. Thanks for watching. Shirdel out.
Thanks so much for watching this the whole way through. I know it was a bit long, but you know. As I said in the beginning of the review, this is the first time I have ever done anything like this, and I'm still brand spanking new to it. I'd love to get some constructive criticism, so if you have any congratulations, considerations, or complaints, let me know in the comment section below. If you want to watch another review of the game in the Destruction Derby series, go check out Kadikarus's review of Destruction Derby 2. It's fantastic, and he's a cool guy to boot. I'm British. If you don't want to miss any more episodes of mine, you can subscribe, or you can watch the next one now, presuming I've uploaded it by this point. So if you're watching this video in February 2014, chances are it's not released yet. I do have a lot of ideas for more videos like this, but I want to realise, so I can assure you this is the first of many of these kind of videos to come. Thanks again, and I'll see you some other place. Probably.